Hey y'all, thanks for joining us today for a Saints live chat Drew Brees edition. If you have been living under a rock and haven't heard, Drew Brees has he has said he is retiring from the NFL. He hasn't officially done it yet because they haven't made an official announcement yet. But that is the big news in Saints land. So we're here to talk about it. First, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Hancock Whitney, for helping us bring you these live chats. And I'm joined by our NOLA.com Saints sports columnist, Rod Walker. I have our two beat writers for the Saints, Amy Just and Luke Johnson. My name is Jeff Nowak, NOLA.com's digital sports producer. That's my dog behind me. That's Zuma. He tore his ACL, so he's having a rough day. But without going too far into that, we can go around the room. First, we can start with Amy. I just wanted to know, what's on y'all's mind today? What's kind of sticking out? It's been kind of a wild 18 hours since we got that initial announcement. What's standing out?
So for me, it's that it actually happened. It has felt inevitable for a very long time, right? But it has happened. He has said he's retired and went on the Today Show with Hoda this morning and talked about what was next for him and how much this meant to him and retold some stories that we've heard several times. But it hits differently now that, I had to write former New Orleans Saints quarterback Drew Brees in a story this morning.
Yeah, and I think one of the things he talked about was, or she asked him specifically, when you turned over your shoulder and looked back at the field, did you know? And he said yes. Luke, you wrote about that pretty extensively, kind of that last look. What was your kind of take on that?
Well, I mean, it was impossible to watch that sequence play out and think he didn't already have his mind made up. I think that moment there and the couple hours he spent after the game with his family, it really cemented in a lot of people's minds that there was some finality to this. And I think that's why yesterday when this happened, we've been waiting on this news to come for 2 months now. And I think yesterday, by the time it happened, a lot of people had already kind of processed their feelings about it. It was kind of an interesting day where this player who's been the face of the franchise for 15 years now and one of the most beloved people in this city. Everybody kind of saw this coming and everybody knew it was coming. It was just kind of a matter of when. And I think that last look to me really drove that home. So I think it lent yesterday a bit of an odd feeling when one of the greatest players ever retires. It was just kind of like, okay, well, it's happened now. Let's move forward. It was an odd feeling, I think.
What do you think, Rod?
Yeah, and Amy kind of touched on it. When I read her story this morning, I just saw former Saints quarterback Drew Brees. It just sort of made it all kind of set in. It was really over with. And, we're just so used to seeing Drew, every Wednesday during the season. We knew we were going to talk to Drew Brees. And, you just saw the outpouring from all of his peers yesterday from all across the league and even some in other sports. And, it just kind of tell you that he transcended, it wasn't just New Orleans Saints. He was a little bigger than that. And I thought the larger than life headline that we had in the paper today, I think it was accurate for Drew Brees and just what he's meant to this city in his 15 years here.
One thing that kind of stood out to me as a digital person was because it took so long and everyone kind of, it was a bombshell that wasn't really a bombshell because we were pretty confident it was coming. You didn't know when, as you said, Luke. But it gave so many news organizations time to create these really extensive projects and packages around his retirement that instantly, within 10 minutes of the retirement, you had this insane array of content. And I know that was the case for us. We've been planning for this for, since before the final playoff game. We were getting this kind of in the can. And I think, our coverage, I think we haven't even rolled all of it out yet, but we have an extensive amount. If you go, we have a specific hub page for a lot of that content. It's NOLA.com /sports/Saints /Drew_Brees. It's kind of annoying, but if you head over to the site, you can find it pretty easily. What what has, if one of you had to pick kind of one thing that kind of stood out as one of the more poignant elements, what would you kind of take that? Anyone could take that question.
I would probably just say his attention to detail and with everything that he did. I was kind of reading over his letter that he wrote today, and he listed like, I think it was 30. I counted the names of people he actually listed, and he listed like 32 people. And it's always kind of tricky when you're listing names of people because you don't want to leave anybody out. But you know how Drew Brees is, and he's not going to leave anybody out. I mean, he addressed all the people by name that he felt had really impacted his career. And obviously, he just kind of said teammates in general. But I think it just says a lot that he penned that type of letter, and hopefully people got a chance to read it. But he just went into all the details and all the lessons he's learned, and it just says a lot about him that he put that much time and thought into a farewell letter. A lot of times people just post it on Instagram and that's it. But and I don't know how many words that letter was, but it was pretty extensive, and it just says a lot about him and his impact and how much this city impacted him.
And that he chose to go through, the paper of New Orleans for it too, like you said, right? So many people, post their goodbyes on Instagram and what have you, but Drew was different and it needed to be different. And I'm glad he did it this way.
Yep. Even the video he posted were his children on the couch. We were talking before we came on air, and I'm very curious to see the outtakes of the rehearsals, because that wasn't a one take thing, but the kids nailed it in the version he posted. I just want to know how many versions exist out there. So kind of pivoting here, one thing Drew Brees said today that is going to be a thing as we go forward, he's going to be taking that broadcasting job with NBC that he signed a contract for months ago at this point. What do you see as the reception for Drew Brees as an announcer? To me, he seems like the perfect type of personality for it, but I'm curious what y'all think, having interacted with him for years at this point.
I think he'll be really good at it just because I know how prepared he's going to be. Drew will go into that studio and whatever game's on that night and all the games that he'll know all the details, all the stats on everybody that's playing, but he's going to do his homework. I mean, that's who he is. He pays attention to details, and that's why he set all these NFL records, because his attention to detail. And I think he'll carry that on to the next phase of his career.
The one
I
advice.
remember right.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say right before the divisional round game they lost to the Bucs, I remember writing a story about how competitive like him and Brady are, and it's in literally everything. It doesn't matter. So I think that'll apply to broadcasting too. I think he will, like Rod was saying, just put every ounce of work in there to be considered by people as the best broadcaster. And I think he'll get there. He's obviously got the personality for it, but I think the thing that's going to make him kind of stand out for it is that drive that made him really good as a football player.
The one piece of advice I would give him is to slow down. Sometimes when he gets animated with us, he can talk really fast and use a lot of run-on sentences and not breathe. And as a broadcaster, he's going to need to slow it down a little bit. But like Rod and Luke said, it's a perfect fit. He's got the knowledge of the game. He's going to be as prepared as literally anyone. I'm interested to see what his first game will be. I think that'll be an interesting experience.
Yeah, he kind of strikes me as, people love Tony Romo because he just seems to be like a kid having a good time up there, and he's enjoying the moment as he's talking about it. And he's also giving like really specific insight. And I think Drew has a lot of that too. And when he answers questions in press conferences, you kind of get that out of him where he's turning into analyst mode. I think one thing he's going to have to be careful about is giving away too much of Sean Payton's playbook when he inevitably calls the Saints game, because he is basically, he's been there for all of it. He knows he knows the ins and outs of that. He could go up there and give away everything that's happening, I think, if on his first Saints game, but that'll be interesting to watch. Looping around obviously he sent out that Instagram post and he announced he's retiring. One thing that we are still on alert for is, they have to have some form of official press conference. Normally, this would be a huge pomp and circumstance thing. With COVID, obviously, it's not going to be anyone in person. I don't think we have a ton of information on what's going to happen, but what are your expectations going forward? Timetable wise, and just how they're going to develop that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So what gave me a tiny glimmer of hope that maybe it will be in person is that Dak's press conference was in person last week. So maybe. I'm not holding my breath, but
the Cowboys also had like 30,000 people in their stadium for games.
I mean, also true.
They've been very like loose and fast with the rules here. So
for sure. But let me dream. Let me hope.
But at some point, I mean, yeah, we do expect him to, talk to people and, get his final words out to the people in New Orleans. Well, I won't say final words, but I don't think New Orleans is always going to be home to him. But at some point, yeah, we'll hear from him. In a pre-pandemic world, I guess that'd have been a big second line parade and all that stuff yesterday and everything. And obviously we didn't get that, but hopefully it'll come eventually. He deserves that.
Yeah, I think when you look back on Drew Brees' career, you can look at the crazy losses, the playoff disappointments, but personally looking at it, I have to say the most disappointing thing that happened was his final season was not what it should have been in terms of send-off, curtain calls and a packed house every night. Do you think, as much as we all kind of felt that he was going to retire, do you think for Drew that he had to have some temptation to try to do it again, just to have a real final season?
I don't know about that, but I do feel bad a little bit, and just that this isn't how he should have gone out. Obviously, he has no control over that, but he deserved better, and that goes for all of the players that retired this year. They all deserve better.
But the one thing about New Orleans, though, is they'll fix it. They'll make sure that he goes out in some kind of way, even if they bring him back I'm sure they'll bring him back for the first game or whenever they can, and they'll make sure that he gets it. But yeah, I mean, like Amy said, you would have liked to see him get it in the dome during the game, one last Drew chant or something. But
yeah, when everything's opened back up, they'll have to commemorate a conversation like Drew de Gras or something like that. And we'll have that right around the season opener.
The crew of Breezes.
Oh boy.
I'm sure that already exists.
Yeah, it's probably a walk.
Everybody dresses up like Drew Brees did as the King of Bacchus in 2010 or something like that.
Okay, so this comment, which I think is probably pretty telling of the emotion involved here. If you had to pick one, give me one memory of Drew that you would kind of hold above the rest, and it can't be the Super Bowl because that's too easy. I'll go around the room here. We could start with Rod.
I don't want to steal Amy's answer, but because we were on a show together, but it was actually what I thought about too. But well, I won't steal that one. I'll just say just his attention to his work regimen. I mean, this is a guy that, if Drew had a schedule to be in the training room from 3 o'clock to 3:15, he was going to be in the training room from 3 o'clock to 3:15. You couldn't interrupt anything that he wanted to do, and I think that's. You just hear people talk about his stickler for, his attention to detail and just his routine and all that. I think that's the one thing that just stands out the most to me about him is just, and you couldn't get him off of that. And that's what made him so successful. And, you watch him in practice and they'd be stretching, and Drew was always going to stretch a little bit longer than everybody else. He was going to hold his stretch 2 seconds longer, and everybody else would be running to their respective stations, and he still stretch a little longer. That's just how he was. He was just always going to put in the extra work, always be you hear people talk about the first guy at the facility and the last one to leave. You just kind of hear that term thrown around, but with Drew, it was true, and people couldn't beat him to the facility because he was always going to be the first one there and just kind of outwork everybody, and that's what separates the good from the great.
All right. So I said this earlier today, but I mean it. So my favorite Drew memory is the last Drew memory. So after he finished talking with us after the Saints lost to the Bucs in the divisional round of the playoffs, when he came back out on the field to spend time with his family, like that shows who Drew is. Football is everything, but family is even more than that. And in past years, the Brees family would always spend time on the field after games. Obviously, COVID kind of threw a wrench into that this year, but the last game is the last game. And usually they'd spend 15, 20, 30 minutes out there. But that's when I knew it was over after this last game, because he was out there for almost 2 hours. And you knew the gravity of the moment in the moment, and rarely does that happen. And so that's what's going to stick with me, I think, forever. It's just watching him play with his kids, have Tom Brady come over, talk for a little bit, give him a hug. That's going to be the memory that is stuck in my mind forever when I think about Drew.
So I think I have 2 answers for this. And one, if I'm like thinking back to an individual game, the game he broke Peyton Manning's touchdown record stands out because like not only was that like what everybody was anticipating that night, like everybody knew it was a possibility and went out and did it against Peyton Manning's old team on primetime TV. Like he had all those great games in his career on primetime TV. But then he also goes out and completes 29 or 30 passes in that game. It's just insane. Like I will never, ever, ever forget that game. And, you know, kind of following the theme that Amy and Rod are going out with here, I think the thing about Drew that I'll always like remember about him, and I included this in my piece, is, you know, I think one of the traits that made him so great for New Orleans is just that like everyman quality that he has to him. He's not this supersized guy. He's 6 feet tall. He looks like you could just see him out there playing racquetball at your gym or something like that. And you know, a lot of things about him are unassuming. You know, and he's doesn't have the supermodel wife or, you know, the family legacy that Peyton Manning and all those guys had or whatever. But the thing that made him so great was that he did everything in his power to maximize every bit of those physical gifts, of his mental gifts, and to marry them all together. And, you know, I think that makes him a great representative of the city, and it makes him relatable to people, and it makes him feel to them more like themselves. And I think that's the thing that I'll always like kind of hold on to with Drew, is that he's a 6 foot, 200 pound kind of balding guy who was one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history. It's kind of awesome.
Sometimes I always think about his pregame huddle and just how much a part of, I mean, that wasn't just a Saints thing. I mean, you see NFL promos and Drew in the pregame huddles, like, you know, just something they would show almost every week. And I did a story on that about 2 or 3 years ago about his pregame huddle and just what went into it, like how did he come up with his speeches. And one of the things that was just so impressed was that, like, he actually like put a lot of thought into it. He'd read a book and see a sentence in the book, and he'll use that to, you know, inspire the team. And it was just kind of tells you what kind of guy he was, that, you know, it's just all about motivating and inspiring people. And that was something that it'll be different. I mean, I know DeMario obviously has, you know, played a big role in filling in on the pregame speech now, but it'll be different, you know, without Drew in the middle of that thing. So that's something that also sticks out to me.
Yeah, he's definitely a run through a wall guy, like a guy who can yell at you until you're ready to run through a wall. And, you know, emotional leadership is hard to replace. But, you know, if just to kind of finish off that note, you know, the story, the memory that sticks out to me is actually a story that I was not involved in, but it kind of doubles down on what Amy said. And this was actually, if you remember this, he said this during the Star of Stars event that we hosted, and he, I believe you emceed or you interviewed Drew during it, and he told a story about how his kids would go in the locker room and steal like Alvin Kamara's shoes and Marshawn Lattimore's gloves, and then he would they would come to him and be like, what's going on? And he'd be like, that's my kids, my bad, and he would go and like find them in their pillowcases in their room, I just think it's such a good example of something that rarely happens in the NFL, which is like his whole family is part of this team. They don't play on the team, but like they are involved, and that's true of a lot of longtime players. It was true of Morstead, who also had his final season with the Saints. But it's really just when you see a guy retire, and why does it have kind of this outsized impact compared to how it could be across the league? I think that's as good of an example as any of like just he was completely threaded together with this organization through and through. All right, I think that's all I had. Was there anything any of y'all wanted to bring up? Anything y'all are working on? Anything y'all are expecting that you wanted to hit on?
Well, I think the thing that we all got to keep in mind right now is that the Saints don't have a quarterback for the 2022 season. At least, I mean, they might, but we don't know who it's going to be, and there's a lot of unpredictability in these next couple weeks, or perhaps month. So I think we all got to keep an eye on what's going to happen with Jameis Winston. We all know the Saints want to keep him. Other teams can start negotiating with Winston's agent now, so that'll throw another wrench in the plans there. Taysom Hill started 4 games last year. Is that enough for them to feel confident in him starting again this year? Will they try to make a move in the draft for one of the top quarterbacks? I think that's going to be, now that Drew is officially retired, that's going to be the thing that we all need to keep an eye out for in the next coming days, weeks, month.
One public service announcement I will make: do not overreact to the number 140 million.
Yeah.
That's been interesting to see how people report that over the last few days. Just knowing what we know about the Saints and how they treat cap numbers, it's not a real thing.
It's monopoly money.
Right.
Essentially.
And obviously we're talking about Taysom Hill. They restructured his deal. The number to look at there is 7.5 million because that's what they saved against the cap. But do you think, obviously there's been a ton of restructuring. There's been a ton of restructuring and, just dominoes going down. Does it kind of feel like Drew Brees was the final domino, and now that kind of bombshell has gone off, or should we expect to see a flurry of moves from the Saints? I
would expect that they still need to make some moves to clear some more money. You could potentially be looking at players like Patrick Robinson or Latavius Murray, guys who are owed a couple $1 million for next year, or in the years beyond, potentially being casualties because they still need to create some money. They could potentially do the same thing by signing long-term extensions with some of these guys who do them. Brian Ramczyk, Marcus Williams, Marshawn Lattimore, maybe Teron Armstead is in the last year of his deal. So there's ways they could do it, but we're far from hitting the last domino. We got a lot of stuff yet to cover.
And just because the Saints get under the cap now, they still need to continue to get further under the cap because they have to sign their eventual draft picks too. So,
which they got 2 extras in the 3rd round this year, 2 supplemental picks, which it's been a long time coming for those picks.
3 picks.
Well, yeah, 2 in the 3rd and 1 in the 7th, correct?
6th.
Yes.
That's for AJ Klein.
And that counts against the one they lost for the COVID. So that's why I say extra.
Well, they might. So their sources say that they're in the appeals process for the Week 17 stuff. So who knows what will happen with that? Not sure yet, but yeah, they did lose one of their picks already, and potential further discipline for the Week 17 running backs fiasco has yet to be decided if anything happens. So we'll see.
Well, one thing I always remind people is those 3rd round picks, don't sleep on them because the Saints draft 3rd round really well in the 3rd round. Jimmy Graham, Teron Armstead, Akeem Hicks, Alvin Kamara, Trey Hendrickson, all 3rd round guys. So pay attention to the third round. That's what I'll leave you with. But okay, we can wrap it up there. Thanks to Luke Johnson, Amy Just, Rod Walker for joining today. You can follow them on Twitter. Most of their Twitter accounts are just their names, but Luke's got a buy in front of it. And my name is Jeff Nowak, NOLA.com's digital sports producer. I'd like to thank Hancock Whitney Bank for helping sponsor this live chat and bring it to y'all. And yeah, thanks y'all for watching and joining, and peace.
Wish Jeff's dog a happy recovery.
Yes, Zuma, the dog, he plans to get a second opinion on his injury, but he's going to fight hard in his rehabilitation. Get back on the field next.
9 to 12 months.
9 to 12 months.
Hopefully his IR stint won't be long.
Yes. His contract is guaranteed by the household, so he's going to get his money either way. But we'll leave you on that. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.